Every month I make a new tabletop role-playing game adventure zine, and I try and challenge myself to come up with unique, fun adventures, and I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at my latest 3 zines and kind of explain my whole design process when it comes to creating fun one-shot role-playing games. Okay, let's start with Flick Silverpin's Guide to the Emperor of Worms, FSG number 5. This is a linear dungeon crawl through the inside of a giant, massive, colossal worm creature. With these zines, I really try to give myself a sort of design challenge. In this case, how do I make a linear dungeon crawl interesting? And then also a thematic challenge. I knew I wanted to make up a bunch of crazy insect type characters, and so I thought that having like an insect city inside of a giant worm would be cool. Like I say, for all of these adventures, they work great as one-shots, so I give some adventure hooks to kind of get things going if you want to use it as a one-shot, but they also connect together into one big ongoing campaign. So this adventure picks up right where Flick Silverpin's Guide to the City of Eternal Night leaves off. So yeah, here's a map of the Emperor, all the inside parts that the players have to find their way through. And really it's like each section of the worm. So I looked up worm anatomy and made basically each section of the worm is like a room in the dungeon. And really think of this adventure kind of as the classic like Pinocchio getting swallowed by the giant whale kind of escape style adventure. So it starts in the mouth and the brain. You meet Mordred, this crazy fly who's in the Emperor's head sucking on his brain blood. He gives the players a quest to sort of make their way through the Emperor, and off they go into the esophagus, where they meet a bunch of other insect people and travel to the city of Eek. So there's all of these insects have kind of resigned themselves to living inside this giant worm and have built up this ramshackle city on stilts. And there's a tavern called the Drip, and there's a little table where you can make your own citizen of Eek insect person. This is Kudatosh, who is a frightened little weevil, and in my playtest game, he is kind of become my player's like sidekick character that's gone with them on the rest of the adventure, you know, and has signed up to fight the darkness below with them. So moving from the esophagus into the crop, this is Morgan, a giant spider, queen of the crop, and she runs a sort of fighting pit. So if the players want to make it through the crop, they have to survive 3 rounds in the fighting pit, fight against Titan and Millicent, his millipede mount. If they can make it through the crop, then they get into the gizzard, where they meet Zork, a giant slug who spends his time bathing in the Emperor's stomach acid. He's a telepathic slug and wants to play these games of chance with the players. If they make it past that, then they move into the tract, which is the big long intestine part of the Emperor, and this is basically just a bunch of random encounters that happen as they move through the intestines. So there's crazy amoeba and these worm larvae, all the eggs that spawn other giant worms. There's another big spider creature named Alfredo, a juice seller who's, you know, maybe not actually a juice seller. And if the players make it all the way through the tract, then they get to the Paraproct and can hopefully escape the Emperor, and they talk to another fly creature who's not eating brain blood, he's eating something different. And yeah, that's the the Emperor of Worms. Next up, if the players can escape the Emperor of Worms, they'll find themselves in the city of Coppernop and have to uncover the mystery of the red growth. So for this adventure, I wanted to do a hex crawl through this big cavernous underground area, and also reintroduce the Darkspawn, who are pieces of the darkness below, which is like the big bad evil guy, you know, monster at the end of this whole adventure. So this is really the first adventure that has the darkspawn as the main antagonists, and they're sort of the cause of this red growth, this super poisonous fungus that has taken over this city completely. It's basically like an apocalyptic city that the players have to travel through. There's these 3 spires that they can go to and figure out what's going on here. As you can see, the Emperor of Worm exits into Copperknop, into this wasteland city. And like all the zines, I start off with some explanations, some adventure hooks, talk a little bit about Copperknop, and then this is the origin, the original mushroom person. So I forgot to say that this city is like a giant mushroom person city. I'm calling them mycelia. So this is the original mycelia that all other mycelia come from, and they're kind of all connected through roots and spores. They all kind of know what's going on with each other. This gives a big explanation all about the origin and what kind of trouble they have caused. And then the severed, who are the mycelia, they have disconnected from the roots and are like fighting back. So the players will eventually meet them. And then of course the darkspawn, what they're up to in this place. So usually I just have these little darkspawn guys, but now I'm starting to introduce some other versions. So there's this kind of wizard darkspawn called the Cloaked Void, and then he created this dark hollow creature that kind of floats around the city looking for something. So as the players are exploring, they have to deal with this red growth, which is like the super poisonous fungus that if it gets on you, you're in big trouble. You have to figure out how to cure yourself. Maybe that's part of the adventure. And then traveling through all the hexes. So it's kind of hard to see, but they're hexes that you travel through, and you basically roll what type of encounter you're going to get. So it could be a dangerous encounter, an environmental encounter, or a safe encounter. And so you kind of build the city as you play. And this was my design challenge of how to make an interesting hex crawl through a ruined city. So a lot of the dangerous encounters are all these like mutated versions of the mycelia people. And then environmental encounters, like there's spore clouds. And if I'm making a mushroom kingdom, I gotta have stuff like a pipe portal, giant mushroom bounce pads, and you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm referencing there. And then, if the players get lucky, they just get a bunch of fun, safe encounters. One of my favorite things to do in these zines is come up with a bunch of magic items, and in this case, like a bunch of mushrooms that have different effects and stuff. I'm getting to illustrate all the different mushrooms, the little one-up guy down here. And then eventually the players will end up investigating the different spires, which are kind of like the cultural hubs of this once great city, and they'll confront the Cloaked Void, and hopefully they'll help some people and also learn a little bit more about the darkness below before they move on further underground. So yeah, that is Flick Silverpin's Guide to the Red Growth. Oh yeah, there's also these little worms that make light that, maybe they grow into giant emperor worms, or maybe not. That's up to you. So I feel kind of bad because this video and the last one feel very promotional, self-indulgent. Check out my stuff, go support me on Patreon and all that. So to make up for it, I thought it would be fun to take a look at another D&D zine. This one's called the Vortex Isles by Brooklet Games, Jim Hall of Brooklet Games. So if you're into what I'm making, I think you'll also be interested in hearing about the Vortex Isles. So let's check that out. Okay, this is Vortex Isle, the very first adventure from the Brooklet Games Patreon by Jim Hall. And Jim is doing something very similar, monthly adventures on Patreon. And I'm super excited about this because, obviously I'm making the stuff that I want to see out there. And Jim is doing the same kind of thing, and I love it. So this is the very first adventure. It's a sailing pirate adventure into this awesome vortex of islands down into this horrible creature at the bottom. The setup is the players are looking for the lost treasure of Captain Lalago, and they have to hire some pirates to sail them around these islands and hopefully find this lost treasure. So I really love how this book is laid out. Super usable at the table. You got your ships that you can hire and an explanation of how sailing in the ships works. There's some ocean encounters, and then all of the factions that kind of are sailing around this vortex and inhabiting the islands that you come across. A great adventure hook section about how the players find themselves there and why they're searching for this treasure. And then this is really cool. I love having these sort of italicized blocks of, you know, that we're getting into the locations, the different islands and stuff. And each place or each new scene has these sort of italicized blocks that you can just read straight to the players, and the writing is super good. You know, there's a beginning section, like how you introduce the players to this world. And then most of the contents of the zine are the people that make up these places, who you're introduced to. So like who you're going to hire as your captain. And then, you know, when you go sailing, you gotta build out your crew and meet all these people. At each island, there's different encounters that you can run into. And as you go through and are meeting all these people, you get a sense of what this place is like and, you know, how the different factions are interacting. And, you know, there's a bunch of setbacks and dungeons. There's a couple of dungeons to explore as your players are trying to find this treasure. And, you know, eventually they'll make their way down and hopefully find the treasure or die trying. There's a great little way of, you know, what comes next, how to insert this adventure into a game, or, you know, it's like if you want to get your players from here to here, this is a great way of getting players from point A to point B. Another cool thing is there's a bestiary that has the monsters with 5e stats, but also with cairn stats. So if you want to play some cairn, you know, you're all set up, ready to go. And then this is the stuff I love. Make a pirate, a bunch of cool items and everything. Just a really great little book. So I'll have a link down in the description to the Brooklet Games Patreon. If you like the stuff I'm making on Patreon, definitely go check it out. These are great books. Jim just released a little preview of an upcoming adventure all about exploring this crazy city, and it has like a really cool traversal mechanic with a deck of playing cards that I'm excited to check out. So yeah, I am a patron of Brooklet Games. Definitely go check them out. And also, you know what? I'll have a link down to where you can get this zine, the Vortex Isles zine, as well, now that it's gone from Patreon. Nice. And lastly, Flick Silverpin's Guide to the Fiery Caldera. Ember Troll on the cover, Magma Tortoise on the back cover. So for this one, you know, I'm doing lots of underground adventures and caverns and stuff. I wanted to do sort of lava inspired adventure. You know, there's been poison fungus and crazy insects and stuff, and I wanted to do a lava theme, but I also wanted to figure out how to make a dungeon crawl a little more interesting and dynamic. So this time I have made the lava tubes surrounding the fiery caldera. This is the lake of lava here, and the tunnels around it change. So the map in the front shows when the lake is overflowed and the lava has filled up these caverns. It's kind of cut off one of the sections of the dungeon. And then on the back cover, this is when the lava kind of drains back into the lake and allows for a little bit more exploration of the dungeon. So if we start off, you know, just like all the other zines, they start off with some explanation. Perfect is a one shot, but you can combine it with the others. This is Flick Silverpin's Guide number 7. So this continues right after the red growth. And this one introduces Morla, the Ancient One, this super huge, old, ancient magma tortoise who lives in the fiery caldera. And actually, when she gets into the lake is when it overflows and the lava spreads into the caves. And then when she gets out of the lake, that's when the lava recedes. So she is definitely based off of another giant tortoise from a well-known 80s movie. If you can figure it out by her title, The Ancient One, I just ripped off. There's also the Ember Trolls. So they are these, you know, big trolls that don't care about lava at all. They take baths in the lava and, you know, have made these tunnels their home, but recently they have started acting really weird, and it's kind of the player's job to figure out what's going on with these ember trolls and, you know, explore the caves very safely because they're very dangerous because they're filled with lava, but also, you know, figure out what's going on. So it might have something to do with the Dark Whisper and the darkness below. it does. There's no might about it. It does have something to do with the darkness below. So as usual, a bunch of random encounters, giant crabs that are running around everywhere. And then, you know, it's a dungeon crawl. Each room has something different. There's a kind of rampaging steam elemental named Squalos. There are the children of Morla, the ancient one. So there's 3 other little, smaller, but also still pretty big magma tortoise kids running around causing trouble. This is Wonder. So this is like a 2-dimensional being from another dimension. That's kind of weird. 2-dimensional being from another plane of existence that is kind of like the embodiment of wonder. And I got this idea, you know, when I'm writing in my studio. I have this poster from my friend Andy J. Pizza, who does this series of little characters called Invisible Things, and it's characterizations of things that aren't real, you know, like things you can't touch, but things you can feel. So I just love that idea, and I thought I would steal it for this adventure and the next one that's coming up. It plays a big part in Flick Silverpin's Guide to the Errant Tower, which is if you sign up for Patreon this month in March, you'll get that adventure, and you'll find out more about these 2-dimensional beings from another dimension. It wouldn't be one of my monthly adventure zines if it didn't have a bunch of magic items and stuff. So this is Honk. He's a rock goblin that is stuck in the middle of the lava and needs help. And, you know, maybe he'll reward you with something cool, like a bundle of gibber root or a shiny arrow that can pin a shadow. That might be helpful when fighting the darkness. Okay, so then this whole part gets into what Vorla's quest is, all of the stuff she knows. She can sort of shed some light on what's going on with the darkness below, give a little bit more. You know, if you're tying these adventures together into one long campaign, your players will get a little bit more knowledge about the darkness below each adventure. And then it moves into the Ember Den. This is where the Ember Trolls live, and there's a bunch of different Ember Trolls hanging out. This is Werf, an old blacksmith who's not very friendly. And then you find out that they've actually kidnapped one of Vorla's kids, Popo, but he doesn't seem to mind too much. And then there's Khan and Bo, who's a 2-headed Ember Troll leader who has been corrupted by the Dark Whisperer. So yeah, it's up to the players to figure out how to set things right with the Ember Trolls and, you know, get things back to normal inside the fiery caldera. That's it for these 3 zines. There's 3 left in this adventure before we move on to another area of the world. So yeah, these 3 adventures are now available in my online shop. Link in the description, of course, if you want to pick them up. If you like what you see, they are available there. And if you would like to support the channel, get one of these monthly adventures plus extras. So they always come, if you sign up on Patreon, you get one of these in the mail every month, and they always come with something extra. So, you know, for the Fiery Caldera, it came with a color version of the map, a big 11x17 color version of both maps that you can share with your players as they explore. The Emperor of Worms came with a bunch of paper miniatures printed out that you can cut out and assemble yourself. So signing up for the Patreon gets you the books as soon as they're available, and also they come with some fun extras, and technically you don't have to pay shipping, so you save a little bit of money too signing up for the Patreon. Of course, that's also linked down in the description. If you're still here at the very end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I super appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.